I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second.
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, Tyler, it's hard to be calm when you've just watched two of the most dramatic Game 7s in National Hockey League history with two incredible late third period comebacks that lead to franchise-altering victories and possible losses on both ends. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. You can follow us on Twitter as Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe to wherever you get your audio. I'm Kevin. I am all by myself tonight, but we are going to recap round one, preview round two, and talk a little bit about there's some Canucks news this week. There was also some Flames news this week. We'll get to that at the end a little bit later on. But the adrenaline is absolutely pumping after an incredible, just two incredible hockey games here, two incredible Game 7s. One, of course, on Saturday with Colorado and Dallas. Colorado leads 2-0 early in the third, and former Avalanche Mikko Rantanen scores not one, not two, but ultimately with the empty net goal. 3 goals in the third period to lead the Dallas Stars to advance to the second round of the National Hockey League playoffs. Rantanen with the first hat trick in the playoff hat trick in the third period in Game 7 history. And then the Winnipeg Jets just coming back from a 2-0 deficit early in the first period, a 3-1 deficit after 2 minutes to go, 2 6-on-5 goals, one from Vlad Nemestikov, the other from Cole Perfetti, in a double overtime. Captain Adam Lowry sends the Jets flying to the second round of the playoffs. They will face the Dallas Stars. We'll get to that in a second. I do want to start with it's a little bit of a somber tone, as of course there's some emotion, but I do think it's important just to start here. This has been a really heavy week in where I am in Vancouver. For those that don't know, there was a very tragic event that happened last Saturday evening at the Filipino festival called the Lapu Festival. And people were just enjoying the night when a car ran over a gentleman in a car, attacked, just ran over people. 7 people are. It's just a very tragic event here with the passing. Unfortunately, left a lot of people injured, a lot of people that passed away, and so we've right now looking at the latest numbers of this. It is, of course, it was in the evening of April 26th, and but I wanted to just give the condolences to those impacted. This weekend I went for a walk at the area where it happened, and it was something to just go by that memorial. And I think one of the things that struck me was just how lengthy that was. It was not just one street, it's actually on 3 different streets. You see a number of flowers. You'll smell, if you go by there, you'll smell incense, loads of flowers just all around that entire area. It's just a really heartbreaking situation, and just thinking of those that are affected, and it's not only really here, the Filipino community, but in Vancouver, but across the world, with at least 11 people, pardon me, have passed away from the ages of 5 to 65. Over 30 people were injured. Just a very horrible situation. So I do want to just pause before we get into this and give our condolences to the Filipino community and those that are affected by this horrible tragedy. Tough turn, but we will take it. But let's start with the game Sunday night. St. Louis Blues, Winnipeg Jets. Game 6, St. Louis scores 4 quick goals in the second period, pulls away 5-1. Connor Hellebuyck, for the third time in this series, is pulled, leading to a number of questions to Connor Hellebuyck going into Game 7, and it doesn't start great here in Game 7. Jordan Kyrou scores a minute 10 in. Matthew Josephs makes it 2-0 before we're halfway through the first period. The Hockey Night in Canada intermission panel is literally debating, do you put in Eric Comrie? I think the obvious answer to that question was no at the time. You win or lose with Connor Hellebuyck. And quite frankly, I think we'll get to Connor Hellebuyck in a second here, but really he actually did keep the Jets in the game for the most part. The Blues do get the 3-1 goal with Radek Faksa late in the second period. And, it's one of those things you don't want to allow an early goal or a late goal. Not only that, you lose Josh Morrissey in the game. You already had Mark Scheifele out. You already had Logan Stanley out. And Jets were well behind the 8 ball. It's 3-1 going in with 2 minutes to go. 3 minutes ago, really, they pulled the goalie, but with 2 minutes to go, Vlad Nemestikov finds a way to knock one in. It's 3-2. And then there's another opportunity. Can't remember who took the shot, but it was a pile up in front of the goal. That almost went in on Bennington. But it's still 3-2. But Nikolai Ehlers, yes, there was a bunch of fumbles and stumbles and bumbles, but he found a way to make the right play and an incredible pass to Connor and Perfetti, and they tie it with 1 second to go, heading us into overtime. Not 1, not 2. And folks, this is where you got to give some Connor Hellebuyck some credit. Connor Hellebuyck was outstanding from the third period on. He made some big saves on Thomas. He made a huge save with Jordan Kyrou as well early in the second overtime. They had a few chances. The Jets mostly controlled overtime, really controlled from the second period on. But the demon that Connor Hellebuyck was facing, he overcame, and Adam Lowry on a great play by Kyle Connor sets it up back to the point to Pionk. Lowry deflects it, and the Jets are moving on. I know there was a bunch of people that wanted to talk about how unserious the organization of the Winnipeg Jets are. This is a franchise-altering win for the Winnipeg Jets. Your captain, Adam Lowry, gets the winning goal. Connor Hellebuyck stands on his head, turns it around. Neil Pionk, 41 minutes. Dylan Sandberg, who I thought was going to be an X factor for the Jets, he came up, he stood his ground. He played over 40 minutes. They were down to 5 defensemen halfway through the first period. And they had which included a number 7 defenseman, really, in Hayden Fleury, who wasn't playing that often. So you had Neil Pionk, you had Dylan Sandberg, you had Dylan DeMello, you had Luke Shen, who I also thought was just a giant in this game. And then you had Hayden Fleury. So you had the 5 defensemen that you were playing for the rest of the game. You were without Mark Scheifele, pardon me. Huge kudos to the Winnipeg Jets for this win. Huge kudos. Down 3-1 with 2 minutes to go. That is a franchise-altering win. That might be a Stanley Cup series-changing type of win. And that's going to carry a lot of momentum when they face the Dallas Stars next week. Starting here on Wednesday. That's when that series starts. So I think kudos for them. Now, you do have a number of questions for sure. You've got the Mark Scheifele question. You've got the Josh Morrissey question. And you got the Logan Stanley question. But you have home ice advantage. You had a really good game from Nikolai Ehlers. Kyle Connor, I don't care what anybody says. I think just stop Kyle Connor is an elite winger in this league. He was outstanding tonight. I think we saw the maturity of Cole Perfetti tonight. I thought he was really good. There was a reason you brought in Brandon Tanev. There was a huge block late in the game. He banged his hand up, but he was a monster. Luke Shen they brought in. He was a monster. Just a huge credit for the Winnipeg Jets. I know that everybody was all over them, and a lot of questions are coming in, and I get it. It was not a great series for Connor Hellebuck overall, especially when he went to St. Louis. But now this is a fascinating series for the Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuck versus Jake Ottinger. We'll get to that in a moment. Do want to talk about the St. Louis Blues because they do deserve a ton of credit for the entire year. A 12-game winning streak to get themselves into the playoffs. They bring in a new coach in Jim Montgomery. They lost Dylan Holloway late in the year. Jimmy Snuggery came in and acquitted himself quite well. They didn't have Colton Parayko for most of the regular season. He comes back. He comes back in these playoffs, and I thought that pairing with him and Fowler and Falk and Brober were really good. Robert Thomas needs to be on a conversation for the Canadian Olympic team for sure. Jordan Kyrou was really good. Pavel Buchnevich. Jake Neighbors took a huge step. Braden Shen, feel for him losing to his brother. That was an incredible embrace near the end there with Luke and Braden. I think the Blues have there's a lot to like about the St. Louis Blues. And one of the things that I'm really intrigued about, they also lost Tyson Tucker in this series, which was with tough leg injury back in Game 4. There's a lot to like with the St. Louis Blues. They've been drafting really well. I think Jake Neighbors is going to take a huge step. Really like Tyson Tucker. I think their blue line is really good. I think Dylan Holloway, it was just an incredible add in the offseason with the offer sheet. Jordan Binnington, when he plays like he does, the Blues are a better team. I do think they probably need to find another impact player, a top 6 forward. I don't know where you get that, but I think that's one of the things that they're probably going to have to look for. They seem to click with Jim Montgomery. That seems to be a really symbiotic relationship. The Blues are going to be around for a while. I think they're drafting really well, as I mentioned. They're able to develop. Just think they need a couple of more high impact forwards. I think one more center will really help them out. But the Blues have a lot to be proud of and heartbroken for sure. I feel for the Blues. I mean, 2-0, 3-1. You come into Winnipeg. You gave him all that you can handle. You were well out of the playoffs with the discussion of trading Braden Shen at the trade deadline on March 4th. You get to the 7th game of the first round. I just think tremendous kudos for the St. Louis Blues. Really a good year for Jordan Binnington overall. Lots to be happy about in St. Louis, although they're going to have to take the chance, take a step, and breathe for sure. Let's go to Colorado, Dallas, which I think is going to be talked about as well for a long time because the storylines of the entire season landed right here on Saturday, and it was Mikko Rantanen. Of course, Mikko Rantanen was traded in late January to the Carolina Hurricanes. They got Martin Necas and Jack Drury back in the trade. And Mikko Rantanen and the Carolina Hurricanes don't really get along. They dated. They went on a date. It didn't work out. Rantanen gets traded to Dallas for a package that includes Logan Stankoven. The Dallas Stars were stumbled their way into the playoffs. They lose Miro Heiskanen. They lost Miro Heiskanen early in the regular season, but they were not expected to. Didn't come back in this round. Jason Robertson also doesn't come back in this round. And a lot of people thought Colorado would win, and I was one of them. I was one that thought Colorado would win. But I also had a thing in the back of my mind, if you listened to the first round preview, I'm like, this Dallas team is really resilient. Remember last year, they were down 2-0 to Vegas and came back and won. They lost those 2 games at home, by the way, to Vegas. They're down 2-0 here. Nathan McKinnon scores in the third period. And Mikko Rantanen and Roope Hintz, who just exploded in game 6 in Colorado with 4 points. Mikko Rantanen gets a natural hat trick, scores the 2-1 goal on a great shot, but I do think Blackwood probably would like to have that one back. So it's 3-2, ties the game when the puck goes off Gerard skated into the net. 3-3, they get a late power play on the Jack Drury tackle. It was a penalty. So here's the guy that you get from Carolina to help you advance to the Stanley Cup final. He takes a penalty. Wyatt Johnston scores an unbelievable goal. Takes the lead. And 3-2. Rantanen, so it's not a natural hat trick, pardon me. Johnston scores. Rantanen gets the assist, so he gets 4 points. Anyway, Mikko Rantanen is the starter, not the natural hat trick, pardon me, but he scores a hat trick, and the Dallas Stars are advancing to the second round. The storylines that are attached to all of this because of Mikko Rantanen and probably one of the biggest midseason trades in a long time. Probably Joe Thornton is the one that would be closest to that in terms of a mid-season trade. Massive trade. And then you get the trade to Carolina. He gets traded twice. He ends up on your rival, and he comes back to haunt you. But first, let's talk about Dallas. A couple of things here. That blue line had a lot of questions coming into this playoff. The right side, especially with Alex Petrovic, Cody Ceci, and Igor Lyubushkin. Petrovic was unbelievable. I thought Petrovic was really solid. I thought Cody Ceci was quietly effective as well. Thomas Harley was the best defenseman in the series. We'll get to why with Colorado in a second. But Jake Ottinger might be the best goalie when you're trailing and need a goal. He made a couple of big saves as well. Just kept the team in the game. Here, Colorado had a 4-minute power play early in the first. They scored the first goal they scored was shorthanded. They scored 3 power play goals, 2 shorthanded goals. Their power play just wasn't effective. And throughout the entire series. And so Dallas penalty killing outstanding. As much as the story of Gabriel Landeskog comes back, let's not forget that Tyler Seguin comes back in this series. This Dallas Stars team is just an incredibly resilient, well-structured team. Pete DeBoer 9-0 in Game 7s. Dallas is owning Colorado right now. And it's, people said that they've, I remember Sean's hand when we did the Vancouver Canucks season wrap-up. You picked Dallas if Heiskanen and Robertson were in the lineup. They won without him. They're getting him back at some point here in the second round. This team is a really complete team. They don't have those, other than Rantanen and Heiskanen, there's probably your big superstars. This is just a well-oiled machine, the Dallas Stars. And also, I just want to say something else. A very underrated hockey atmosphere. We talked about hockey atmospheres in Canada. Of course, you saw the Winnipeg whiteout. Well, seen that with Toronto and Edmonton. Dallas is a really good. I really enjoy watching games in Dallas. They do have an environment there. I know it's Texas and hockey's not supposed to be all of that. They do have an environment there. They've developed a really good organization there. For Colorado, I think this is really very interesting. Was thinking a lot about, I don't know where I'm at with the Colorado Avalanche. Yes, they have McKinnon and McCarr, but I think the one thing that people forget is they were in the first wild card position entering the Four Nations. It was the injuries of Joel Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota that Minnesota slipped. Colorado rose. Of course, they had the impact of the trades, and they made a number of them. Of course, not only the Necas trade, they made the Charlie Coyle trade. They made the Brock Nelson trade. They brought in Ryan Lindgren. They switched goaltenders. They did a whole sweep of different things. They basically retooled this team on the fly. And I think where I underestimated that is in terms of a team, the Dallas Stars are a more connected team because they made the Mikko Rantanen move. They brought in Cody Ceci and Michael Granlund. And much maligned Cody Ceci, but I mean, again, Cody Ceci, Cody Ceci does his, again, look at the penalty kill and look who's playing on the penalty kill again. And you look at the Edmonton Oilers, and one of the reasons they got to the final last year was because of that penalty kill. You know who played the second most ice time on that penalty kill? It was Cody Ceci. Look, I know the analytics community and the analytics numbers are not big fans of Cody Ceci, but he plays to his identity, and it's effective for him. Give him credit for that. Anyway, back to Colorado. Definitely the big conversation is going to be about the number 2 center. I think you understand. I think you understand the Mikko Rantanen trade in some respects. I mean, I think Chris McFarland probably hit the panic button a little too early. Maybe you end up signing Mikko Rantanen. I think that's going to be a conversation happen in Denver for a long time. It didn't work out. Rantanen came back and haunted you. You can't say you won that trade because Rantanen came back and knocked you out of the playoffs. The other trade that I think is going to be coming into question here is the trade for Brock Nelson. You gave up Callum Ritchie and a first-round pick. Callum Ritchie is your best prospect. And if you look at the Colorado Avalanche draft numbers the last few years, it's not good, guys. One of the reasons that I think Dallas is consistently beating Colorado is they are drafting and developing players at a better rate than Colorado. I mean, you think about Maverick Bourque, you think about Wyatt Johnston, you think about Logan Stankoven, who they ended up trading for Mikko Rantanen. Of course, you got Jake Ottinger, Jason Robertson, Liam Bichel in Dallas came through. Again, he was great. But you look at the Colorado Avalanche the last few years. Sure, they drafted Cale Makar after Miro Heiskanen, but they don't have a lot of other things that they played a 7th round pick, Nina Prishkapakov, this year, but he got injured. There's nobody from the Callum Ritchie. There's nobody on that 2023 draft that has played yet. They had 2 picks in 2022, 4 picks in 2021, and 5 picks in 2020. The Bowen Byram from 2019, Alex Newhook from 2019, their first 2 first-round picks, they're no longer there anymore. They don't have that young prospect that can come and scare them. They're going to have to be aggressive again in free agency. I imagine that they're going to be going hard after Sam Bennett. I think they're going to be going hard after a defenseman, whether that be Aaron Ekblad. But even if you're talking about a trade for Rasmus Andersson, what do the Avalanche have? I mean, remember, they were a wild card team. They never got to the top 2 in that division throughout most of the year. They were fighting in the bottom. Yes, it's a great division. I get it. I totally get it. But I'm a little worried. I got to be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be a hot take here. I think there's a lot to be worried about with the Colorado Avalanche next year and going ahead. They don't have a first-round pick for 25. They don't have a first-round pick for 26. They don't have a top 3 pick in 25 and 26. They're going to have to be very aggressive in free agency, and they have currently $5 million in cap space to work with. I think there's a number of people who are going to be going after Sam Bennett. I don't think that free agency is going to be all that easy for Colorado. I get that they're a destination place right now, and I get that you have McKinnon and Makar. But here's the thing. They are turning into what we think the Edmonton Oilers are. High-level talent on top, not a lot of depth in the bottom. Logan O'Connor was the second best scorer on that team in the playoffs with 5 points. They didn't get a goal from Brock Nelson. They got very little from Charlie Coyle. I just think there's a lot of questions in Colorado. I'm sure they'll be fine. But not sure how fine they'll be. So that's the Central Division. We've got Dallas and Winnipeg. I do want to recap the other series before we get into the second round. And we'll start in the Pacific. And I still feel for Los Angeles Kings fans. I think that this is just probably turns out to be the third most devastating loss after the Blues and after the Avalanche. But the Kings' devastation here is they're up 2-0. Yes, they blow the lead in game 1, but they come back and win Philip Deneau. They dominated game 2. They were in control in game 3. They make the unnecessary challenge. You give the Oilers the power play, and the Oilers just take over. And you saw Oilers fans, and they thought that they were going to win the series. But you have the lead, though, in game 4, going into the third period. It's a 2-goal lead. I don't know. I think the Kings treated the Oilers with way too much respect. They treated this blue line like the 1970 Canadians. Just still not convinced of this blue line for the Edmonton Oilers. The Kings, in a lot of ways, and I'll give the Oilers the credit in a second, but it's hard to argue from a Kings perspective that they did not let them off the hook. They took charge in a lot of ways in this series, and they almost came back in game 6. It turned out to be 5-4. They scored a little too late. But they had the lead in every game of the series. Even the one that the Oilers dominated in game 5, they scored the first goal. They just didn't hang on to win. For me, a few things. I mean, Darcy Kemper wasn't spectacular. Andrei Kuzmenko had his moments. We knew what Andrei Kuzmenko would have his moments. That's Andrei Kuzmenko. He has moments. I think Drew Doughty, a lot of people thought Drew Doughty struggled. I do agree with that. Quinton Byfield had a good start. That chip that he should have done reeled him in. Here's where I'll give the Oilers credit, though. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Evan Bouchard do not get a 5-on-5 point. I think for the last half of that series. Evander Kane comes in, he does his job. John Klingberg comes out of injury hell, he does his job. The Oilers' depth pieces, which was supposed to be a Kings advantage, outplayed the Kings, and they played more. The Oilers played more than the Kings. I don't understand why Jim Hiller was so hell-bent on playing his top players so much. I don't know if Jim Hiller understands why he does that. He was asked about it, and he doesn't regret it. I'm really surprised by the way that Jim Hiller is going to be back in the LA Kings. Just think that's I don't know how he's going to respond, how the team is going to respond. I think the Kings have a lot of questions, especially in terms of age with Doughty and Kopitar. Even Kevin Fiala. Not super old, but still. They added a lot of offense. Kevin Fiala took a huge step in terms of being a scarier player. But I just wonder, for the Kings' perspective, what they're going to do next year. That was your best chance of beating the Oilers. You had home ice advantage, and you couldn't do it. You had a 2-0 lead, and you couldn't do it. This is a big dragon that the Kings are going to have to face with the Edmonton Oilers going forward. I don't know where the Kings are. And I don't know if there's a player out there in free agency that can lead them out of that abyss. I think it's fair to expect a step back from Drew Doughty. It was fair to accept a step back from Anze Kopitar. Do you get a step up from a Quinton Byfield or a Brant Clark? You have your goalie. I think definitely you have to also look at your forward group and what you need to add. I think you end up, I think if you're the Kings, you have, and the Avalanche too, Sam Bennett is going to be a prize chase. I think the Kings should be in on that one. I think the Avs will be on that one too. So, but the Oilers, give them credit. They went from Skinner to Picard. Picard is not the most beautiful goaltender in the world, but he got the job done. The depth players, the depth pieces of the Oilers got the job done as well, and they're off to the second round. They're facing the Vegas Golden Knights. Just want to touch on that series, Minnesota and Vegas, for a moment. Vegas did not get off to a good start. Jack Eichel, too quiet, picked it up. Aiden Hill wasn't great, picked it up. They're down 2-1 in the series. They get the big, they're down again. They're down one goal quickly, 3-2 in game 4. They get the goal quickly to tie it. They win that game in overtime. Then in game 6, Ryan Hartman, late goal, puts Wild up. They look at it for kicking. They clear that. But Gustav Nyquist is an inch offside. Game goes to overtime. Mark Stone does it, and the Avs moved on. The Golden Knights move on. The Golden Knights have found ways to win in these situations. The Minnesota Wild are still building on that. But there's a lot to like in Minnesota. And I think the talk that was happening on Sunday with Kirill Kaprizov and expressing his desire to stay in Minnesota, hopefully he signs there. If that does happen, I think that's a franchise-altering, that's a brand-growing decision for the Minnesota Wild. Keeping him for a long time. He would have been in the Hart conversation had he been healthy. So you got a guy like Brock Faber, who is going to be a big-time defenseman in this league. Zeev Beam played some games. I think there was some growing pains, but he played some games. Philip Gustafson is a good goalie. Congratulations to Marc-Andre Fleury on a great career. Ryan Hartman had a really good series. They probably are another team that Matt Boldy just is another guy that he's a beast. I think they need a right-hand shot. I think it feels to me that if I'm Minnesota, Brock Besser is the right guy to land over there. I think that's a marriage made in heaven. He's from there. He's come through. He came through, I thought, played really well in the playoffs last year for Vancouver. I think he'd be a good fit there. I think they want to add another center. I think Marco Rossi, so there's going to be some questions about. But I think there's a lot to like in Minnesota. I really do. And they're drafting really well. They're starting to build something there in Minnesota. They are a serious organization, and they're getting away from that Ryan Suter, Zach Parise buyout money. Things are going forward in Minnesota. Excuse me. I think they will win a playoff round here next year or the year after. They're close. They're very close. So that's the Western Conference. Eastern Conference, that seems that happened 10 million years ago. You've got Florida and Tampa. I picked Tampa. Boy, do I regret that. Florida won that series in the first 10 minutes. When Matthew Tkachuk stepped on the ice, just scores the goal. right in Tampa. Just 5-1 game one. It just looked like Tampa was playing from behind the rest of the series. It just feels like Florida is now in Tampa's head. And you kind of heard that I kind of felt that a little bit when you heard the exit interviews in Tampa. This Tampa team is going to come back with a bit of vengeance. I think it's an interesting decision where you're at with Tampa. Because Tampa has the potential to be where Pittsburgh is now, an aging team with not a lot of prospects. We talked about Colorado and their situation. Where's Tampa in terms of their prospects, in terms of picking their young talent? And I do think, even if you are a destination franchise, I do think that you still have to draft and develop. You still need to do it. Even if you like, I know that you want to kind of make those impact moves, but you still have to find a way to have your prospect pool. Like, I know everybody's looking at Florida and all that they're doing, and like the shrewd moves. We'll get to them in a moment, but I just want to talk about Tampa here. This is a team that has potential aging problems here with an aging defense with Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough. Hedman played with a broken foot, by the way. No first-round pick for the next 3 years, 25, 26, 27. I know that, but that's an aging team. It's an aging team. I know that Tampa Bay is going to want to take a run, but they also have to look at that future as well, because you are going to need some prospects at some point here. I mean, you got Nikita Kucherov for 9.5 for the next 3 years, Braden Point. Kucherov's 31, Gensel's 30, Cirelli, who's a Selke nominee, 27, not bad. Nick Paul is making 3.1 at 30 years old. Yanni Gourde, 33, UFA next year. Hedman is 34. McDonough, 35. I don't know about the blue line after that. And then you got Eric Chernak at 27, but I don't know that blue line after that. I think there's a lot to be worried about in Tampa as well. Under the radar, Vasilevsky, 30. It's a bit of an older team. And this Florida team is a mean team. And, Nico Sturgeon, they make a couple of shrewd moves again at the deadline. A lot of people questioned the Seth Jones move, but it turned out to be the right move when Aaron Ekblad was suspended. Now Ekblad is back. Seth Jones is back. Your blue line is set. You've got the best goalie, probably the best playoff goalie in Sergei Bobrovsky. And you got Matthew Tkachuk. Florida's in good shape. Toronto, Ottawa. I know that Toronto was panicking. I remember it seems so long ago that the Toronto fans and media were all panicking after losing 3-2. Up being 3-0, and then losing 2 games, and then finding a way. And Craig Berube said it. It's not about the core four, and he was right. And why was he right? Because Max Pacioretty scores the winning goal. William Nylander, Austin Matthews were good, but Max Pacioretty scores the winning goal. This feels like a Brad Treliving team, Toronto. Just knowing what Brad Treliving is. This is a Brad Treliving team. They brought in Chris Tanev. They brought in a lot of veterans. And I picked Ottawa originally to win the series, but I didn't think that Ottawa could win 4 in a row. Felt that Toronto would win Game 6, and I was right on that. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about Ottawa. A lot to be excited in Ottawa about. I thought Game 1, their inexperience did show. I thought as the series went on, they started to grow a little bit. Linus Ullmark started to play a little better. Brady Tkachuk started to come into his own. Tim Stützle started to understand what it was like to play in the playoffs. Ridley Gregg is a pest. Shane Pinto is a Jordan Staal type of player that's going to get Selke votes going forward. I really like that Shane Pinto line. For Ottawa, for me in the offseason, I don't know if they make a massive splash in the offseason. I wonder if their massive splash is at the trade deadline. I wonder about a guy like Drake Batherson, if he's a guy that they move out for something. I think Dylan Cousins is working out there, and I feel like Drake Batherson and Dylan Cousins is a little bit redundant. So I wonder if Drake Batherson is a guy that they move on from. I wonder if they find a right shot defenseman, another right shot defenseman. I think that could be something that they add, and probably something on the fourth line. But I don't know if they make a huge splash in the offseason like they did last year, trading Jacob Chychrun for Nick Jensen and getting Linus Ullmark. I wonder if their big splash is more during the trade deadline. But it's an interesting, Ottawa's in a good place. Washington, Montreal. I didn't have a lot of expectations for Montreal in the playoffs. But they're going to be something. I think Lane Hudson's my pick for Calder. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Uri Sofkoski, that line is really good. They're going to have to fix that middle six, I think. Patrick Laine played with a injured finger. I don't know if you can say that Patrick Laine was a true success. I think they're very excited about Ivan Deminoff. That's a young team with a lot of high end. I mean, you've got Caden Gooley, got Jaden Struble there on that blue line. I think they're going to need a right shot D going forward as well. Their goaltending situation is absolutely fascinating because Dobech is playing well, Montembeault, Team Canada, and they also have a guy in Jacob Fowler that I think they're very high on. Middle six, right shot D are a couple of areas that Montreal needs to improve on. For Washington, just flat out efficient. I didn't think they were particularly spectacular in any way, shape, or form. But Logan Thompson got the job done. Alex Ovechkin played well. Tom Wilson was a difference maker in that series. Of course, you got to remember the Wilson-Anderson fight. Battle in the bench. He just has an interesting personality. They look well-rounded. Connor McMichael, they just look like a well-rounded team. Finally, Carolina, New Jersey. I was definitely wrong about that series. But the reason I ended up picking New Jersey is I thought they would go to Jake Allen at some point in this series because Jake Allen had better numbers than Jacob Markstrom, and they didn't. And I think that was one of the factors that cost me. That cost the Devils the series here. I mean, the goaltending wasn't great. Markstrom was fine, not great. They definitely missed Jack Hughes. The Devils did, but and then that bottom six was too many injuries, I think, for the Devils as well. For Carolina, they just find ways to win. It's somebody on the Carolina Hurricanes is going to get them the victory. Whether it's Andrei Svechnikov with a big game in Game 4, or Seth Jarvis, or Logan Stankoven, this is a well-rounded Carolina Hurricanes team. It's not spectacular, but it gets the job done. Which leads us to the series second round, which is, of course, in the Metro Division, it will be the Carolina Hurricanes versus the Washington Capitals. That series will start on Tuesday. Monday, after the draft lottery, Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs, round 2, part 2. And then in the Central, you got Dallas and Winnipeg that started in Winnipeg on Wednesday, and then Edmonton and Vegas on Tuesday. Let's start with doing their preview for the second round. And we've got Carolina, Washington. In terms of who we're picking here. like in terms of position, I think I give the goaltending edge to Washington. I think Logan Thompson has been. I would take Thompson over Kochetkov and be interested to see what Freddie Anderson could play in this series, though. Blue line is interesting to me in terms of both of them. I think, of course, I'm a big Jacob Slavin fan. I think he's one of the best defensive defensemen in the game. And you know they lost a lot. I mean, they lost Brett Pesce last year, but this blue line, Jacob Slavin there, and then Washington with Jacob Chikrin having 20 goals. He had a pretty good series, I thought against Montreal as well. So I'm looking at the stats here for the Canes and that blue line. Jacob Slavin is there. I'm really also a big fan of Jalen Chatfield. I feel like he's a younger Chris Tanev in a lot of ways. Shane Gostisbehere I thought was really good. Jackson Blake had a really good series with 4 points. I'm talking about the forwards. Taylor Hall has come in and fit in really well. That top 4 blue line, though, Brett Burns, Jacob Slavin, Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Chatfield, just efficient. I mean, they got contributions from Mark Jankowski, Jack Roslovic, and the forward group, Jordan Stahl, of course, perennial Selke Award guy. For Washington, you know what they have. They have Alex Ovechkin. They have Dylan Strome. Ryan Leonard came in and I thought acquitted himself pretty well overall for a rookie in the playoffs. Blue line, I would actually, honestly, I think I would give to the Hurricanes. I just think that top 4, I just really like that. My question with the Hurricanes has always been about the offense. I still don't know if they have anybody that is scary. I mean, you've got Alex Ovechkin in Washington. That is just a dynamic person. Pierre-Luc Dubois has been much better in Washington than he has been at any point in his career. I think that proves well for him. I think Andrew Mangiapane has been okay in terms of their forward group. Dylan Strome has fit in really well. The Hurricanes have been here before. I think that's one of the other things. In terms of the experience, I feel like the Hurricanes have been here before. Rod Brind'Amour has got the experience. I think this is a 7-game series. I really do. Brandon Duhaime, Anthony Beauvillier have done pretty well. I think ultimately, for me, I'm going to, although I do like Rasmus Sandin and Matt Roy, I think that I'm going to go with Carolina because of that blue line. But I think that this is a really close series. I think this is a 7-game series. It wouldn't surprise me if Ovechkin is the difference. I'm kind of flipping and flopping here. This is the one that you know what? Actually, I am going to go with Washington. I'm going to stick with Washington here because I just feel like I ultimately, as I think about it, yes, I started with Carolina, but I'm going to go with Washington here because I do feel like Alex Ovechkin's on a little bit of a mission. I do think that the Washington Capitals have the edge in goaltending. I like the blue line of the Hurricanes more, but I actually like the forwards in Washington a little bit more. Not a lot more. But I think I really like Connor McMichael. Brandon Duhaime is a pest as well. Don't forget him. I think he'll be the X factor in this series. I'm going to go with Washington. This goes 7. Florida, Toronto. Fascinating series. It's always just fun to hear Paul Maurice talk in the playoffs. It's one of my favorite things. He's just such an articulate coach. The Panthers lose a bunch of players like Brandon Montour, and they come in and bring in Seth Jones. They just come in and put the pieces together. But if there's, I feel like Matthew Tkachuk is a difference maker in this series. But if there's anybody in hockey that can contain Matthew Tkachuk, it's Chris Tanev. I'm going to be very fascinated to see how that works out. How does Craig Berube match Chris Tanev with Matthew Tkachuk? I think getting that series win off the back here for the Maple Leafs, by the way, which was 2 years ago, is going to help a little bit. I think that one of the other things, though, and the problem here is Brad Treliving has built a Brad Treliving team in every Brad Treliving way. And one of the things that Brad Treliving ultimately struggled to do with the Flames is find a goalie. I mean, Jacob Markstrom kind of worked out, but Brian Elliott, Chad Johnson, Mike Smith. I feel like Anthony Stolarz is as good as he's been, feels like he's in that category. He was the backup to Bobrovsky. When you have Sergei Bobrovsky, I just think it's too big of an edge. I think Florida will win that series. I know that the Leafs are at home. The Panthers don't care where they're coming from. They're a 2-time Stanley Cup finalists. They're a Stanley Cup champion. They know how to win. And yeah, Matthew Tkachuk looks refreshed. Alexander Barkov, Sam Reinhart, Selke Trophy nominees, Sam Bennett. I think ultimately the forwards and the goaltending of the Panthers are the difference in this series. Panthers take the Leafs in that one. I think it goes 6. Dallas Winnipeg is going to be absolutely fascinating. You've got the Olympic number 1 goaltender battle for the U.S. right here with Connor Hellebuyck and Jake Oettinger. I think the question ultimately is in Winnipeg for Connor Hellebuyck is the monkey off the back here now that he's gotten over the St. Louis hump. But for Jake Oettinger, I said this a bit earlier, he's one of the best goalies, and when you need a save, Jake Oettinger is one of the best goalies. I mean, you come in with knowing that you're expecting Robertson and Heiskanen back in Dallas, questioning Morrissey and Scheifele are back in Winnipeg. I think ultimately, more people were thinking that the winner of the Colorado-Dallas series would beat Winnipeg anyway. But don't count Winnipeg out of this. Yeah, you got Kyle Connor. You got a growing Cole Perfetti. Adam Lowry is a guy I don't think people understand how good Adam Lowry is. He's just he's the heart of that Winnipeg team. I think Winnipeg's going to stretch this to 7, but I think Dallas is going to come away with the win. I think it comes down to the health of the team. I think Mikko Rantanen and Roope Hintz, that finish line of Hintz, Granlund, Rantanen, I think will be a bit of a difference. But I think it comes down to, I think this goes 7. I think Dallas can win. But I don't think that this is going to be a cakewalk in any way, shape, or form for Dallas. Cole Perfetti's Vladimir Nemestikov ended up having a really good series. I think we're seeing the growth also with Dylan Sandberg. Neil Pionk had a great game Sunday night. I think a lot of this series is going to come down to health. But Dallas will win. And then you have Edmonton, Vegas. This is, I think, Connor McDavid said already, they want to they have some revenge on their mind. Of course, the big question in Edmonton is going to start in goal, Skinner or Pickard. We'll see who does that. I was originally thinking, well, at least Vegas won't make the same mistakes that the Kings did. But Vegas blew a 2-0 lead to the series lead to Dallas last year. So I can't be confident in that, saying that Vegas is going to do that. Goaltending, I think it's Vegas's edge, but I don't know if it's that huge of an edge because Adin Hill wasn't spectacular until late in that series against Vegas. If he continues to be that, yes, it's a clear edge. Blue line, obviously, for me, that's Vegas. I just think with Pietrangelo, Theodore Hannafin, Braden McNabb, who's an underrated defensive defenseman, Jack Eichel, Thomas Hertl, that bottom 6, I think the one thing that's going to happen here that Vegas will do differently than the Kings is they're going to roll 4 lines quite consistently. And I'll be interested to see how Edmonton counters that. I think that Vegas will not be stubborn, and they will make coaching and adjustments. The X factor in this series is Pavel Dorofeyev. He's a quiet 30-goal scorer in Vegas. I do think Vegas wins this series. I just think they're a deeper team. And I know that there's people in Edmonton who will counter that. But I just think that the edge for me for Vegas is the blue line. I just think that this blue line is a complete blue line. But I think that this is a fascinating series. I think Jack Eichel gives Connor McDavid some fits. I think one of the things Jack Eichel takes Connor McDavid being picked first personally. Wonder if he does anyway. I like that top 6. I just feel like the Vegas is when everybody was debating about Vancouver and Edmonton who would win this division in the offseason last year, the answer was Vegas then. I'm sticking with it. I think Vegas is still the best team in this division. I think Vegas wins. So I've got Washington, Florida in the East. I've got Dallas and Vegas in the West. Let's get to the news that happened in Vancouver, and then we'll get to the news in Calgary. We'll start in Vancouver. We've got Rick Tocchet deciding to step away, which created its own new drama scene in Vancouver. I expected Rick Tocchet to stay. He ultimately decided to leave. Looks like it appears to be Philadelphia. Who knows? We'll wait and see on that. I'm not going to speculate on why Rick Tocchet left. That's for Rick Tocchet and Rick Tocchet only. I do think that this was ultimately an exhausting year, admittedly, from him and the team. If you listen to the exit interviews, you got the Pettersson-Miller feud, which I think just took a toll on everybody, on the entire organization, from top to bottom. And I just think Tocchet, I think that's ultimately the thing that I'm left with. I think was a sad day. I think Rick Tocchet is an excellent coach. I don't think that he was particularly the problem. I think there was a number. The Canucks came in with a tough hand this year with the Demko injury, with, and Dakota Joshua cancer. Quinn Hughes injured much of the year. Brock Besser had a concussion or had a head injury at least. Miller, Pettersson, that drama unfolding. And then just think there was so much ultimately against Vancouver this year that I think Tocchet felt it time for a change. I have in terms of Jim Rutherford and his conversations, and I feel like Jim Rutherford is going on a world tour here. Spoke to the 100% Hockey podcast with John Shannon. I don't know where I'm at, to be honest with you, with Jim Rutherford, because I think in some ways I think the honesty is refreshing, but I think sometimes some of the things he's saying feels almost unnecessary. Like the Cole Quinn Hughes wants to play with his brothers. I don't know if that was necessary for him to say, but it just created another story in hockey with Quinn trying to see if Quinn, Jack, and Luke can play together. And then you had the situation, of course, with all the talk that he said on that 100% podcast with John Shannon. I just think for me, I think where I'm at here is I think the Vancouver Canucks, as an organization, needs some quiet. I know that this is a noisy market. I know that it will always be a noisy market. But the Vancouver Canucks have to find a way to work through it instead of responding to it. And what I mean by that is I just think they need, let the market, let the media, let everybody talk. They're going to talk. But you don't need to add to the fire. I think it's just time for this organization to take a step back and figure out what exactly is going on. The whole question of what they do with Quinn Hughes is an interesting question. There's going to be the questions of Pettersson. I think the more and more I think about it personally, I don't think he's back next year, but I could be wrong. This organization just kind of needs to figure out. I said this on Twitter. They need to find their North Star. What is the identity of the Vancouver Canucks? And I think we need to hear more from Patrick Allvin and less Jim Rutherford. I personally said I feel like Jim Rutherford is overstepping here, and I would like Jim Rutherford to take a bit of a step back. Would like this organization to be a bit more quiet in their own way and just get to work. Get to work. They've got a lot of things to decide, including now a head coach. And I think they need to make some decisions here and just, close the leaks, get to work. That's pretty much it where Vancouver is. We'll see where Rick Tocchet ends up. I mean, Mike Sullivan's now with the Rangers. You've got you have Philadelphia, but don't sleep on Pittsburgh. I don't think that people realize. I mean, yes, Pittsburgh's getting a little older, but Kyle Dubas has done some sneakily shrewd things with that Jake Gensel tree. Don't remember the name Ville Koivunen? I think Erik Karlsson is a name to watch in the offseason. I think they will try to trade him, and they will bring in some prospects. They're building underneath that Crosby-Malkin tree, and I know that people are looking at Philadelphia for Rick Tocchet. Don't sleep on Rick Tocchet to Pittsburgh. I still think that that's a possibility. I'm not an insider, but I do see that being a possibility. Let's talk about Calgary to close this out. Matt Coronato on Saturday signs a 7-year, $6.68 AV deal, and for the Flames. And so Coronato is locked up. That was the big thing. Now, I did say that he could have been offer sheet. He could not be, of course. Thank you for those that corrected me. I appreciate that. But at the same time, if you sign Coronato to a bridge deal, there would have been a possibility that an offer sheet would have been on the table with a bridge deal. So the fact that you put him in a 7-year deal avoids that entirely. So the potential of the offer sheet, whether that be now or later, is not there anymore. I think it just adds to ultimately what the Flames are trying to do. What you need to do in a rebuild is sell hope. And the Calgary Flames are doing a phenomenal job at selling hope. Of course, Coronato had 24 goals, 23 assists, 47 points last year. I know that there's a few people that are saying that they're kind of talking to the people that think that this is an overrated risk, that you don't know anything. I'm going to just retort this by saying I understand why you think that this is an overpay, because you look at the numbers of Matt Coronato and it feels like this is a very early pay. I understand where you're coming from. I don't think you don't know anything. But I think that one of the things that comes through in this is one of the things don't think that gets talked about enough is I think the Canadian market in terms of finances is much different than an American market, where I think it is necessary in a lot of ways to try to lock up the players that you believe are part of your future quicker than you need to in America and in the States. And I also think a lot of young people like Jordan, a lot of young players, I mean, Jordan Kyrou, Tim Stützle, Dylan Cousins, Robert Thomas, they got these high paydays really early. So I think if you're the Coronato camp, if you look at that, you say, look, why can't I do that? That's already been put in place. I think Matt Coronato 24 goals, 77 games. First full season. That would tell me that he's going to be a 30-goal scorer in this league pretty consistently. 25 to 35, I think, is a good expectation at 22 years old. This is a really good deal for the Flames. And where they sell this hope, and I put this on Twitter too, and I just want to explain this because some people have pushed the back. With Matt Coronato, Dustin Wolf, and Zane Parekh, it feels like these are the new Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk. Now, they're not necessarily the same, but if you look at Dustin Wolf right now, that relationship that he is starting with this fan base is very similar to the one that Calgary had with Johnny Gaudreau. They fell in love with him, kind of felt like his son, and I think that a lot of people look at Dustin Wolf the same way. Dustin Wolf is a genuine human being. For those who don't know, he, after that last game against Vegas, and when they were missed the playoffs, he comes out and shakes hands with the fans. He's just a very open, transparent human being. I think people appreciate that about him. He's not the typical goalie in terms of that he needs his cocoon before a game. He's willing to talk with people. I think he's engaging. I think that helps a lot. Matt Coronato seems to be a bit more of a quiet person. That reminds me of Sean Monahan. Monahan was a 30-goal, consistent 20, 30-goal scorer. If you get that, that's Monahan. Craig Conroy compared Coronato to Mike Camilleri. That's a good comparison. That's not necessarily the elite, but that's not bad. And then Zane Parekh, very early. He's not Matthew Tkachuk in terms of the player on the ice, but Zane Parekh has a personality that is a bit more outgoing, similar to Matthew Tkachuk. So that's why I kind of made that connection early in this process. But for the Flames, I think that they've done a phenomenal job in just bringing hope to starting a relationship with the fan base as well. Craig Conroy has done a really solid job in establishing the identity of this team. I think that they're going to be intelligent in what they do in the offseason. Of course, number of questions still. Big one, Rasmus Andersson, what happens there? I don't think anything happens in the offseason. But there are people that disagree with me and think that he's gone. We'll wait and see. Contract talks can't start for him or Dustin Wolf until July the 1st. I do think Dustin Wolf, they will try to wrap that up as quickly as they can. And I do think they will go 8 years on Dustin Wolf. I think that will be a long-term deal. Connor Zary is the one that people have been asking me about a lot. I ultimately think because of his injury history, I think that this is going to be a shorter deal. But I don't think they want to get rid of Connor Zary. I think it's his health. Kevin Ball, the other one that I think is going to be interesting in the offseason. So still some work to do with the Flames. But I think that they're off to a really good start. And I think there's a lot of positive vibes around the Calgary Flames right now. Look, they fought their way into a literal tie with the St. Louis Blues for a playoff spot. Some people disputed that. Whatever. They got a standing ovation from the paying public in the stands. The Coronato signing, I think, just adds to where the Flames are at. And the vibes are good in Calgary right now. They may take a step back next year, but I think Flame fans will understand that. We've got the draft lottery for Monday. We'll see what happens there. We'll see in terms of that. Lots of questions around that and whose pick goes to where with Montreal and Florida and the Sean Monahan trade and all of that. So good vibes on the Flames side. Lots of questions on the Canucks side. And the second round of the playoffs, I think is going to be absolutely fascinating. What a great first round. We're in for a great second round. I think all of these series are going to be lengthy series. I don't see a sweep. I think we're going to 6 or 7 for most of them, as I mentioned. So we'll wrap it here. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Sean at BeardyConnect03, Tyler, TNOBLE, Chris is Schneid's, SCHNEIDZ. Make sure you follow the Fireside Chat folks, Dan, Matt, firesidechat.ca. And then you can follow me at KVOLE, Shifts and Pucks on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, wherever, and subscribe wherever you get your audio. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.